Hi guys. Before we begin, let me ask you something simple. If you were standing on the deck of a shiptheweather.com, the sails full, the sea behaving perfectly, how bad would things have to feel before you decided to leave? Not panic, not fire, not a storm tearing the sky apart, just unease, because in 1872, an experienced captain, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a full crew made a decision so ordinary, so reasonable that no one noticed it was fatal. They stepped off their ship, and the ship kept going. No screams, no wreckage, no final message. Scratched into wood, just a vessel drifting calmly across the Atlantic, fully stocked, undamaged, and completely empty when another crew finally boarded it. Days later, they expected death. Instead, they found dinner plates, clothes folded away, a child's belongings still in place. The ship looked like everyone had simply stepped out for a moment and never came back. This wasn't a pirate attack. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't madness or mutiny, in fact. What makes this story disturbing is that nothing dramatic happened at all. Every decision appears sensible, every action calm, every precaution reasonable, and yet, every single person vanished. Tonight, we're not chasing ghosts. We're not inventing monsters. We're not forcing an ending where one doesn't exist. We're drifting slowly through a mystery where caution failed, where silence won, and where history simply stopped explaining itself. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, Chapter 1. The ship that refused to explain itself. Hey guys, tonight, let's slow things down. Dim the lights. Put the phone face down. Maybe loosen your jaw a bit, because we're drifting out onto the Atlantic. Not the dramatic, crashing waves Atlantic. More the gently sloshing, mildly disappointing Atlantic. And floating out there is a ship that somehow managed to become famous by doing almost nothing at all. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, or more accurately, the story of a ship that spent the rest of history forcing people to say, okay, but... Asterisk why though? Asterisk now, before we even get to the mystery everyone loves to whisper about. We need to do something very unexciting. We need to talk about paperwork. Ownership transfers, repairs, bad luck. Because the Mary Celeste didn't start out mysterious. She started out cursed in the extremely boring, very maritime way. She was built in 1861 in Nova Scotia and originally named the Amazon. Already a red flag. Ships named after powerful mythological women rarely have chill careers. The Amazon was a modest merchant brigantine. Not glamorous, not fast, just there. Her job was to haul cargo and mind her business. She immediately failed at that. On her very first voyage, the captain fell ill and died. Just died, not dramatically. No storm, no mutiny. Just unfortunate timing. Of course he did. Of course the first captain didn't even make it past the tutorial level. Things did not improve. The ship was damaged multiple times. She ran aground. She changed owners. She was repaired, resold, renamed by the time she became the Mary Celeste. She already had the reputation of being that ship, the one insurers sigh about, the one sailors side-eye before signing on by the early 1870s. The Mary Celeste was owned by a group of investors who, and this is important, desperately wanted her to be profitable. They had sunk money into repairs. They had repainted her. They had rebranded her. This was going to be her comeback arc. It was not. Enter Captain Benjamin Spooner Briggs. And yes, that is his real name. Benjamin Spooner Briggs. Sounds like a man who owns several sensible hats and gives unsolicited advice about posture. Which, honestly, is pretty accurate. Briggs was a deeply religious man. Not loud about it, just steady, calm, serious. He didn't drink. He didn't gamble. He didn't panic. He was the kind of captain insurers loved and sailors trusted, which makes what happened later extremely inconvenient. Briggs agreed to captain the Mary Celeste on a routine cargo run from New York to Genoa, Italy. The cargo was industrial alcohol, barrels and barrels of it, flammable, fumy, annoying, but very normal, and because Briggs trusted the ship, and because this voyage wasn't supposed to be dramatic. He brought his family, his wife, Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter. Sophia, this is important, not for horror reasons. Just for grounding reasons, people behave differently. When their toddler is on board, they do not casually abandon ship for vibes. The crew was small. 8 men. Mostly experienced. Mostly boring. No known troublemakers. No secret feuds. Just sailors doing sailor things. They left New York Harbor on November 7, 1872. And for a while, everything was fine, painfully fine. Logbooks were filled with normal entries. Weather, speed, course corrections. The sea behaved itself, no monsters. No dramatic omens. Not even a particularly rude seagull. Then the entries stop. Not abruptly, not mid-sentence. They just end. On December 5, 1872, another ship enters the story. The Dei Gratia, which roughly translates to, by the grace of God. Because of course it does. The Dei Gratia was sailing in the Atlantic. Not far from the Azores, when the crew spotted a ship drifting oddly, not sinking, not on fire, just wrong. Experienced sailors can tell. When a ship isn't being actively sailed, the movements are lazy. The angle is off. It's like watching someone fall asleep. Mid-dash walk, they approached, and saw the name on the stern, Mary Celeste. At first, they assumed illness, or maybe the captain had died. And the crew was struggling, all very sad. But very normal. They boarded and found nothing. No people, no bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. The ship was intact. The cargo was mostly untouched. Personal belongings were still. Their clothes, pipes, bedding, even. The child's things, food and water were sufficient. The ship was seaworthy. The weather had been calm. The only thing missing was the crew and the lifeboat, which immediately ruined everyone's day. Because now, instead of a sad story, we have a deeply annoying one. The Dei Gratia. Crew did what sailors are legally obligated to do. They sailed the abandoned ship to port to claim salvage rights, and this is where the story shifts from maritime mystery to legal headache. Authorities were suspicious because, of course, they were an empty ship. Does not wander into your jurisdiction every day, and when it does, people start inventing motives. Maybe the Dei Gratia crew murdered everyone. Maybe they staged it. Maybe there was a mutiny. Maybe Captain Briggs snapped. Investigations followed. Interviews, hearings, accusations, and nothing stuck. The Dei Gratia crew had solid alibis. The timelines didn't work for foul play. The ship itself refused to provide clues. No damage consistent with violence. No signs of panic. No desperate messages carved into wood like "See bad. Regret." The logbook entries ended about 10 days before the ship was found. The last known position suggested nothing alarming, just sailing. So now we have to sit with the uncomfortable possibility that a calm, experienced captain, his family, and a capable crew all chose to abandon a perfectly functional ship in the middle of the Atlantic together without leaving a note, without taking supplies beyond what fit in a lifeboat, without ever being seen again, which is rude. Because history prefers explanations over the years. Theories multiplied. Alcohol fumes, water ingress, faulty. CHRONOMETERS. Sudden panic over imagined danger. Each one almost works and then falls apart quietly, like it's tired of trying. Alcohol fumes could have exploded, but didn't. No fire damage. No scorch marks. No blast-out water in the hold could have scared them, but the ship wasn't sinking. And Briggs knew the sea well enough not to abandon ship prematurely. Pirates. No missing cargo. No violence. No witnesses. Sea monsters. Please behave. What makes the Mary Celeste so unsettling? Isn't that something dramatic happened? It's that whatever happened was likely very mundane. A decision made calmly, rationally, even, and then everyone vanished. The ship itself continued to exist, which feels almost insulting. It was recovered, sold again, put back into service, because capitalism waits for no mystery. The Mary Celeste would continue to have a troubled career. More accidents. More bad luck. Eventually, she was deliberately wrecked in an insurance scam, because of course she was. But by then, the legend had already detached itself from the wood and sails. The Mary Celeste became shorthand for unexplained absence, a floating question mark, a reminder that sometimes history doesn't climax. It just shrugs, and that's what we're going to keep drifting through tonight. Not answers, just people making choices. The sea being the sea, and records that stop talking. So let's float gently onward, because the more you look at the Mary Celeste, the clearer it becomes that the real mystery isn't what happened. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 2. The calm before everyone quietly left. Asterisk, asterisk. All right. Let's ease back into it. The Mary Celeste. It's still floating, still intact, still being profoundly unhelpful. Before we chase theories, we need to slow down and sit inside the daily life of this ship, because mysteries tend to feel supernatural. When we skip the boring parts, and the Mary Celeste was, above all else, boring. A merchant brig in the 1870s did not run on chaos. It ran on routines, same watches, same meals, same slow creaking sounds that eventually became background noise to your soul. Captain Briggs was methodical. Painfully so. He kept a clean ship. He logged everything. He believed in order, discipline, and divine oversight, probably in that order. He also believed in caution, which matters because nothing in his history suggests a man prone to impulsive panic. On board, the crew followed predictable rhythms: sail handling, maintenance, meals that were aggressively beige, salt pork, hardtack, coffee strong enough to wake the dead, but not strong enough to improve morale. To Sarah Briggs lived in the captain's quarters, caring for little Sophia. A toddler on a ship changes things. Sharp tools, it's stored more carefully. Language gets slightly cleaner. People think twice before doing anything dramatically stupid. This is not the setup for a sudden group meltdown. The cargo, though, deserves attention. Industrial alcohol stored in barrels. Not all barrels equal. Some were red oak. Some were white oak. And red oak barrels are leaky. They allow fumes to escape. Alcohol fumes are invisible, odorless at times, and extremely good at making sailors nervous. Now, let's imagine, not dramatically, just calmly, Captain Briggs noticing something off. A strange smell, pressure in the hold, maybe a faint popping sound as barrels shift. Nothing explosive, just unsettling. A captain like Briggs wouldn't panic, but he would investigate. And this is where things get quietly plausible. If Briggs suspected a buildup of fumes, he might have ordered the hatches opened for ventilation, which they were found to be. If he worried about ignition, he might have extinguished open flames, which he likely did. And if he thought the ship might explode, Might. Not definitely. He could decide to temporarily abandon ship. Temporarily. That word does a lot of work here. The lifeboat was missing, but only one. The ship had supplies. The weather was calm. This suggests intention, not terror. The theory goes like this. Briggs orders everyone into the lifeboat. They secure it to the ship with a rope. They drift nearby while the ship airs out, just far enough to be safe, just close enough to return. This is the least exciting explanation, which is why it might be the correct one. Now imagine the rope, snapping, not dramatically, just slowly wearing through. The lifeboat drifts away. The Mary Celeste continues on without them. No screams, no last stand, just distance increasing until theirs. Nothing to be done. The sea does not care how sensible your plan was. This theory explains a lot. Why personal belongings were left behind. Why food remained. Why the ship wasn't damaged. It explains the absence without inventing monsters. But it also introduces something uncomfortable. That everyone did the reasonable thing and still lost. The ocean specializes in that outcome. Of course, this theory isn't perfect. Why didn't they leave a note? Why wasn't the rope found? Because ropes rot and notes don't matter to water. Now, let's gently drift sideways to another possibility. Navigation. In the 19th century, navigation was part science, part educated guess, part vibes. Chronometers mattered, and the Mary Celeste's chronometer may have been malfunctioning. If Briggs believed he was closer to land than he actually was, he might have thought abandoning ship temporarily was safer. Land-based rescue feels reassuring. Even if it's imaginary. Add mild stress, add responsibility. For a wife and child, add an unfamiliar cargo behaving strangely. Suddenly, conservative decisions stack up. None of this requires hysteria, just caution compounding itself. And that's the frustrating thing. Every reasonable explanation ends with the same image. A lifeboat drifting, a ship sailing on the sea separating people from their decisions. Now, because humans are humans. This wasn't enough. People wanted drama. Arthur Conan Doyle never won. To resist embellishment, wrote a fictional account that added blood, violence, and panic. And the public loved it, because fiction knows how to pace. Itself, reality does not. The real investigation found no evidence of murder, no mutiny, no madness, just absence. And absence is boring, until you sit with it too long. The Mary Celeste didn't become famous because something happened. She became famous because nothing resolved, no survivors washed. Ashore, no wreckage from the lifeboat was found. No final message turned up in a bottle like. Turns out this was a bad idea. History hates loose ends, and the Mary Celeste is one long, gently floating one. So as we drift onward, keep this in mind. The most unsettling mysteries aren't loud. They're quiet, they're procedural. They happen while everyone is trying to do the right thing. *** Chapter 3. Theories that almost work. Which is worse, ***, all right. Still drifting. The sea is calm. The ship is unbothered, and humanity is once again overthinking something it can't emotionally accept. By the time the Mary Celeste reached port, the story had already escaped the ship and started living its own life. Sailors talked. Newspapers exaggerated, and investigators squinted at the facts. Like they might rearrange themselves out of politeness, they did not. So people began proposing theories, not wild ones at first, just hopeful ones. Let's start with mutiny. Because mutiny is always the first stop when adults disappear. The idea is simple. The crew turned on Captain Briggs, killed him and his family. Then abandoned ship, which sounds dramatic until you look at literally any evidence. There were no signs of violence. No blood, no damaged quarters, no weapons missing. Also, mutiny requires motive. Briggs was respected. The crew was paid, the voyage was routine, and mutineers usually keep the ship because ships are valuable. Abandoning a perfectly good ship after killing everyone is inefficient. Then there's piracy. Everyone loves pirates. History does not. Pirates steal things. That is their entire brand. The cargo was still there. The ship was still there. Even the personal items were untouched. This would be the most polite pirates in maritime history. Breaking in, harming no one, stealing nothing, and leaving. Highly unlikely. Next comes the alcohol explosion theory, and this one almost works, which is why it keeps coming back. Alcohol fumes could build up in the hold. A sudden ignition, maybe a spark, could cause a loud bang. Not an explosion that destroys the ship, but enough to scare everyone. A flash explosion. No fire damage, no debris, just noise. Imagine that sound in the middle of the ocean. On a ship carrying your wife and child. You don't wait to see if there's a sequel. So Briggs orders everyone into the lifeboat. Again, this fits. Until you ask why no scorch marks were found, why no barrels were ruptured, why nothing indicates heat, and we're back to shrugging. Some suggested the crew got drunk on the cargo, which would be impressive considering industrial alcohol can make you blind or dead. Also, the barrels were sealed and the crew was experienced. This theory mostly exists because people like the idea of sailors being not sayers being responsible. Then there's the seaquake theory, an underwater earthquake causing a sudden terrifying disturbance, water rushing, ship rocking violently. But again, no damage, no displaced cargo, no structural stress, just a calm ship. It's floating patiently. Another idea? The ship was cursed. This is not a serious theory, but it is a popular one. People pointed to the Amazon's bad luck, the early captain's death, the accidents, the constant repairs. Clearly, the ship was offended by human optimism, but curses don't explain logistics. They just outsource the confusion. The problem with all these theories is that they want the moment of abandonment to be emotional, panicked, chaotic, and the evidence suggests the opposite. This was organized, deliberate. The lifeboat wasn't smashed free. It was properly deployed. The ship wasn't trashed. It was left as if someone expected to return shortly. Which leads us back to that deeply annoying word again. Temporary. The idea that this was meant to be a brief precaution, not a final act, is both the most reasonable and the most tragic, because it means no one realized they were making the last decision of their lives. Then the sea does not provide refunds. The investigation, led by officials who very much wanted this to be someone's fault, eventually concluded nothing. They suspected fraud, they suspected murder, they suspected incompetence, but they couldn't prove any of it. The De Gratia crew eventually received partial salvage compensation, not because they were guilty, but because the court was uncomfortable rewarding people for a mystery, which feels on brand. And then the world moved on. Sort of. The Mary Celeste became a story told at sea, a cautionary tale, a campfire whisper without a fire. Every new generation added something: aliens, sea serpents, time warps, because reality, left alone, felt too empty. But that emptiness is the point. The Mary Celeste isn't frightening because of what might have. She's unsettling because of how normal everything was when it stopped. No climax, no explanation, just a ship continuing its journey without the people who gave it purpose. And as we gently drift onward, keep in mind, history doesn't always end with answers. Sometimes it just stops. Writing Chapter 4. The investigation that wanted a villain. Let's settle back in. The ship is docked now. The mystery unfortunately, is not. When the Mary Celeste was brought into Gibraltar, authorities were immediately uncomfortable. An empty ship makes people nervous. An empty ship with no obvious explanation makes them suspicious. This wasn't a philosophical inquiry. This was a legal one. Admiralty courts existed to decide responsibility, liability, and money. And mysteries are terrible for paperwork. So the court began with a working assumption. Someone did something wrong. They just had to figure out who. Their first target was the crew of the Asterix Day. Gratia Asterix, which is very human behavior. If someone benefits financially from a strange event, we side-eye them. The salvage reward was significant, and the story was weird, so officials questioned them relentlessly. They compared logbooks, they reconstructed timelines, and every time they tried to make the math work, it refused. The Day Gratia could not have intercepted the Mary Celeste. Earlier, they could not have hidden bodies. They could not have staged the scene. The ship was found exactly where drifting calculations said it should be. Annoyingly consistent. So the court shifted focus. What if Captain Briggs was the problem? This theory made people uneasy, because Briggs was well regarded. But when a mystery won't cooperate, you start poking respectable people. They suggested Briggs might have snapped, that the pressure of command, the dangerous cargo, and the responsibility of family pushed him over the edge. But again, no evidence. Briggs' logbook showed calm, rational entries. His letters spoke of optimism. There was no history of instability, and if he had snapped, the ship would have shown it. Instead, it looked paused. The court then fixated on the condition of the ship. They pointed out minor water in the hold, a damaged pump, a faulty chronometer. But these were routine issues, nothing that justified abandoning ship. Unless you were being cautious, unless you thought danger was possible, but not guaranteed, which is not negligence, it's judgment. And courts do not like gray areas. The investigation dragged on. Months of hearings, speculation, thinly veiled frustration. Eventually, the court settled on an unsatisfying conclusion. Something caused Captain Briggs to abandon ship, but no criminal wrongdoing could be proven, which is legal language for we have absolutely no idea. The case closed. The mystery did not, and here's where things get quietly interesting. Because after the investigation, the Mary Celeste went back to work. No exorcism, no special precautions. Just new owners, new crew, and the same old sea. She continued sailing for another decade, which is not how cursed objects usually behave. She had accidents. Yes, but ships do that, eventually, in 1885. Her final captain deliberately wrecked her off the coast of Haiti in an insurance fraud scheme. And if that feels anticlimactic, good it should. A ship that baffled the world ended not in mystery, but in paperwork, fraud, and disappointment. The sea reclaimed her quietly, but the story didn't sync with the whole. Writers got hold of it, and writers, unlike courts, hate ambiguity. Arthur Conan Doyle rewrote the story as a violent crime. Others added storms, others added madness, each version louder than the last, because silence doesn't sell. And yet, the real story remains stubbornly dull. A group of people made a decision. The ocean responded, no malice, no spectacle, just distance. And that might be the hardest ending of all, because if the Mary Celeste teaches us anything, it's that history doesn't always punish recklessness. Sometimes it punishes caution. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 5. The ship that became a personality. Asterisk, asterisk, all right? Still with me, the ocean hasn't changed. The ship hasn't answered, but the story has. Started to behave differently by the time the Mary Celeste faded from active service. It had already transformed into something else entirely, not just a vessel. A concept, People stopped talking about Captain Briggs as a person. He became a role, a symbol of the responsible man who did everything right and still vanished. The crew became shadows, faceless sailors in an anecdote, and the ship. The ship became the star. This is always how it goes. Objects survive, people don't, so we give the objects personalities to compensate. The Mary Celeste was described as stubborn, haunted, unlucky. Never, just wood and canvas. Maritime culture thrives on stories. Long voyages need something to talk about. And a ship that sails itself into legend is perfect material. Sailors began avoiding ships with similar names. Owners quietly rebranded vessels to avoid bad associations, because superstition is just risk management with vibes. The phrase like the Mary Celeste entered language. It stopped being literal, an empty house, a deserted office, a room where everyone vanished, but left their coffee behind, always unsettling. Never explained. What's fascinating is how the details started to drift. Some versions claimed meals were still warm. They were not. Others insisted the crew vanished. Mid-task, they did not. But those additions feel true emotionally because the idea of abandonment is more powerful when it interrupts something ordinary. In reality, the ship was found days after any human presence. Nothing was fresh. Nothing was mid-motion. Just waiting. And waiting is deeply uncomfortable. The Mary Celeste became a warning tale for decision-making. Don't leave your ship unless you absolutely must. Don't assume the sea will wait for you. Don't trust that caution will be rewarded. But the irony is that Briggs likely followed best practices. He didn't panic. He didn't ignore a potential risk. He acted conservatively and still lost everything, which makes the story quietly existential. No villains, no heroes, just probability. And probability is not something humans emotionally handle well. Over time, story drifted into pop culture, books, radio, later television. Each retelling sanded off nuance and added tension, because nuance is sleepy and tension sells. But tonight, we're not here for the exciting version. We're here for the original, inconvenient one, the one where nothing explodes, no one screams, and the most important moment passes without anyone realizing it. The asterisk, Mary Celeste asterisk is unsettling not because of what it hides, but because of what it reveals. That sometimes the worst outcomes are born from calm, reasonable decisions made with good intentions, and the sea doesn't care as we drift onward. We'll take one last slow look at the theories people wanted to believe and why we keep returning to them. Chapter 6. The theories we keep anyway. Let's keep drifting. By now, the facts are exhausted. They've been examined, measured, argued over, and politely ignored. So what remains are the theories people keep not because they're correct, but because they're comforting. Humans do not like unresolved absence. We prefer a bad explanation to no explanation at all. At least a bad explanation lets us close the door. The Mary Celeste refuses to let us do that, so we invent things. One popular idea is madness. That something about the ocean cracked the crew collectively. This is a deeply human projection. The sea feels infinite. Isolation feels threatening, so we assume sanity dissolves on schedule. But mass psychosis is rare and coordinated. Madness where everyone calmly abandons ship together is rarer still. Also, madness is messy. The Mary Celeste was not. Another favorite is carbon monoxide poisoning. A slow leak from the stove crew becomes disoriented. Judgment fails. It's a modern theory, which gives it credibility. But again, no physical evidence supports it. And poisoned people do not usually execute clean evacuations. Then there's the Bermuda Triangle crowd, which is less a theory and more a lifestyle choice. The Mary Celeste was not found anywhere near the triangle, but that has never stopped anyone. The triangle exists because humans, like geography with attitude. Aliens occasionally enter the chat, as do time slips, parallel. Dimensions, all very imaginative, all deeply unnecessary. The frustrating thing is that none of these explanations improve on the original story. They just make it louder, and loudness is not what this mystery needs. The most honest explanation remains the least dramatic one. A perceived danger, a temporary evacuation, a small failure that became permanent. That's it. No villain, no twist. Just the ocean doing what it always does, turning small margins into final outcomes. And maybe that's why the Mary Celeste endures, because it reminds us that the world doesn't always punish recklessness. Sometimes it punishes caution. Sometimes it punishes timing. And sometimes it doesn't punish anyone at all, it just keeps moving. As the decades passed, historians stopped trying to solve the mystery and started contextualizing it. They looked at Maritime practices, at risk assessment, at human decision-making under uncertainty. And the story became less spooky and more familiar. A case study in how reasonable people make reasonable choices that fail anyway. Which is not a ghost story. It's worse because it means there's nothing to exorcise. As we float onward, we'll begin to gently wind down, not with answers, but with perspective. Because the Mary Celeste doesn't need a solution. It already has one. Chapter 7. When the sea stops explaining itself. All right. Settle back in. By now, the Mary Celeste has stopped being a mystery and started being a mirror. Because the longer historians sat with the evidence, the clearer it became that this story isn't about disappearance. It's about uncertainty. The sea, especially in the 19th century, was a place where information arrived late, incomplete, or not at all. Captains made decisions with partial data. Charts were approximate. Weather forecasts were basically educated optimism. Captain Briggs did not have the luxury of hindsight. He had a moment, a ship, a family, and whatever he perceived, weather fumes, pressure, navigational doubt, or something quietly mechanical. He responded the way careful men often do. He chose safety. That choice just happened to intersect with bad timing. And timing is something the ocean controls absolutely. What makes the Mary Celeste different from other maritime losses is that it left no wreckage, no debris field, no tragic final sighting. The ship survived, the people did not. That reversal is what unsettles us normally. We expect the vessel to be destroyed and the humans to tell the story. Here, the ship tells it instead, silently, in perfect condition. The ocean did not rage, it did not announce itself. It simply allowed distance to happen. And distance is the most effective eraser history has. Over time, the Mary Celeste stopped being investigated and started being cited. She appeared in essays, lectures, and casual references, a shorthand for abandonment, for absence, for questions that don't need answers to. Function. And that's an important shift, because once something becomes symbolic, accuracy becomes optional. People remember the feeling, not the facts. They remember the eeriness of a meal left behind, even though it wasn't. They remember panic, even though there's no sign of it. The story became less about Briggs and more about us, about our discomfort with calm failure. Because we can process disaster, we struggle with miscalculation. A storm is dramatic. A mistake is relatable, and the Mary Celeste feels like a mistake that grew legs and walked into legend, not because anyone was incompetent, but because no system is perfect. The ocean does not grade on intention. As we drift further into the quiet end of this story, the ship begins to fade again, not physically, but narratively. The more you understand her, the less mysterious she becomes. And oddly, the more unsettling that is. Because the explanation, when stripped down, sounds like this. Everyone did what made sense, and it still ended badly. That's not a story people like to end on, so let's keep floating, just a little further. Asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 8. The Afterlife of an Empty Deck. Asterisk, asterisk. We're near the end now. Not of the mystery, because that never really ends, but of the drifting by the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Mary Celeste had fully detached from her historical moment. She belonged to folklore now. School books simplified her. Newspapers sensationalized her, and casual retellings trimmed away. Context like excess rigging. The ship became an object lesson, or a spooky anecdote, or a punchline, depending on the audience. But historians, quietly and persistently, kept circling back. Not because they thought they could solve it, but because it was useful. The Mary Celeste became a case study in risk perception, in how humans respond to invisible threats, in how decision-making changes when dependents are involved. Modern maritime. Experts, looking back with charts, simulations, and chemical knowledge, largely agree on one thing. There was no single catastrophic event. Just a series of reasonable assumptions, and that's the part that refuses to be dramatic. When you remove the supernatural, the ship doesn't feel haunted, it feels instructional. A reminder that systems fail quietly, that redundancy matters, that temporary decisions deserve permanent caution. The lifeboat, wherever it went, likely didn't last long. Exposure, limited supplies, no navigation. The sea would have erased it quickly, and with it, any chance of closure, which is why the ship carries the weight of the story instead. She outlived her people, outlived her mystery, and eventually outlived her usefulness. But the image remains, a ship underway. Sails set, no. One home, it's not terrifying. It's lonely, and loneliness is harder to explain away. As we prepare to drift into the final stretch, there's nothing left to uncover, only to accept. The Mary Celeste doesn't ask to be solved. She asks to be understood and understanding. In this case, means letting the quiet be the answer. One last chapter left. Let's float into Chapter 9. Chapter 9. Letting the ship go, all right. This is where things finally slow all the way down. Not because we've solved anything, but because there's nothing left to chase. By now, the Mary Celeste has done her work. She's unsettled, she's confused, and she's refused to perform on command. What remains isn't mystery, it's acceptance. Historians eventually reached a quiet consensus, not an official verdict, but a shared posture, the disappearance. Wasn't dramatic, it wasn't criminal, and it wasn't supernatural, it was procedural. A cautious captain, a concerning variable, a temporary solution that became irreversible. And then the ocean did what it always does. It made sure no one got a second chance to revise the plan, Captain. Briggs never became infamous in his lifetime. He left behind no scandal, no journal revealing panic or doubt. Just a clean record that ends. Mid-sentence, Sarah Briggs and little Sophia vanish from history entirely. No memorial, no recovered belongings. Beyond what sat quietly in the cabin, the crew's names survive mostly in footnotes. Lists dot documents that don't tell you who they were. Only that they existed, and that's another uncomfortable truth. History remembers events better than people. The Mary Celeste survives because she can be pointed to. The people survive only as implications. Which is why the ship feels haunted, not by ghosts, but by absence. And absence has weight. The story lingers because it resists escalation. It never gives us a moment to gasp. Just a long stretch of calm where something goes subtly wrong. That's not how stories are supposed to behave. So we retell it again and again, adding weather, adding fear, adding drama because we want the sea to explain itself. It never does, and maybe that's the lesson we're meant to carry away. That not every ending announces itself. Some just drift past while we're making careful, sensible decisions. The Mary Celeste doesn't ask for belief. She asks for patience. And now, at last, we can let her go. Chapter 10. The Quiet That Remains All Right. This is the last stretch. Nothing new will happen here. And that's exactly the point. By the end of her story, the Mary Celeste is no longer a ship, a case file, or even a mystery. She's a mood. A long pause in the historical record, where everyone keeps waiting for the next sentence to start. But it never does. If you stand back far enough, the disappearance stops looking strange and starts looking familiar. People leave things unfinished all the time. Letters end mid-thought. Plans dissolve quietly. Lives move forward without witnesses. The only difference here is scale. An entire crew, a family, a functioning ship, gone, and the world kept going. Trade routes adjusted, new ships were built, new captains made similar decisions every day, most of them without consequence. Which is another uncomfortable truth. The Mary Celeste was not unique because of what happened. She was unique because we noticed. For every mystery ship, there were countless near misses that resolved themselves quietly. Ropes that didn't snap. Boats that stayed close enough. Judgment calls that worked out. History is biased toward failure because failure leaves artifacts. Success just continues. Captain Briggs likely believed he was doing the responsible thing. There is no evidence he hesitated. No indication of fear-driven chaos. Just a man managing risk with the information he had. And that's what makes this story linger at bedtime, because it reminds us that certainty is rare, that caution is not a guarantee, that sometimes the margin between safety and disappearance is thinner than we'd like. The Mary Celeste doesn't punish hubris. She doesn't warn against arrogance. She quietly questions confidence, and then she drifts away. Eventually, even the wreck of the ship disappeared beneath the sea. No marker, no monument, just coordinates that stopped mattering. And yet, here we are, still talking about her, still drifting through the same calm questions. What would you have done? Would you have stayed aboard? Would you have trusted the ship? There's no correct answer. That's the problem. So tonight, as this story finally settles, there's nothing left to solve. Only something to sit with. A ship that sailed on without its people. A decision that made sense until it didn't. A mystery that refuses to wake up and explain itself. And that's where we'll leave it. Out on calm water, no music swelling, no revelation arriving late. Just the soft, unsatisfying truth that sometimes history ends quietly and never bothers to tell us why. Good night, and before we drift completely out of this story, if you enjoyed this quiet kind of mystery, the ones that don't rush to explain themselves, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps this space exist. If the story held your attention, leave a like. It tells the algorithm that calm, thoughtful stories still matter. Turn on the notification bell if you want more long, atmospheric journeys like this, stories where history pauses instead of shouting. And if you have a theory, a thought, or even a question that refuses to settle, leave it in the comments. Some mysteries don't need answers, but they do deserve conversation. Thank you for drifting with me.